This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Today's class is plural pathologies, and I'm Dr. Hanuman, second year postgraduate in the Department of Radiodiagnosis. Let's see the basic anatomy of the pleura. Pleura is a thin, smooth, and a delicate serous membrane consisting of two layers. One is visceral layer and a parietal layer. Visceral layer covers the surface of the lung, whereas the parietal pleura lines the inner surface of the chest wall. Pleural cavity is a potential space between the visceral and the parietal pleura. A thin layer of lubricating pleural fluid is present between these layers. This is the diagrammatic representation showing the lung. Adjacent to the lung, covering the lung, there is visceral pleura. And between the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura, there is a pleural cavity. And parietal pleura lines the inner surface of the chest wall. Visceral pleura covers the outer surface of the lungs and extends into the interlobar fissures. It is continuous with the parietal pleura at the hilum of each lung. Visceral pleura is firmly adherent to the lung surface and cannot be separated from it. This is also a diagrammatic representation showing the visceral pleura, which is extending into the interlobar fissures, and it is continuous with the parietal pleura at the hilum. And coming to the parietal pleura, it covers the internal surface of the thoracic cavity. It is thicker than the visceral pleura and can be subdivided according to the parts of the body that is in contact with. And it has four parts. They are costal pleura, diaphragmatic pleura, mediastinal pleura, and cervical pleura. Here we can see the parietal pleura covering the internal surface of the thoracic cavity, and it is divided into four parts. That is mediastinal pleura covering the lateral surface of mediastinum, diaphragmatic pleura covering the superior surface of the diaphragm, and costal pleura covering the inner surface of the costal cartilage and ribs, and cervical pleura, which is present 2.5 centimeters above the clavicle. Radiologically, we can only see the visceral pleura, and parietal pleura is not seen on X-rays. And in this is the first frontal radiograph showing a horizontal fissure or a minor fissure. This is seen, this separates the upper lobe from the middle lobe of the right lung. It is short as compared to the oblique fissure and runs horizontally from the hilum to the anterior and lateral surface of the right lung at the level of fourth cartilage. And these are the lateral views of right and left lung showing major fissure or oblique fissure. The right oblique fissure separates the lower lobe from the middle and upper lobes, whereas a left oblique fissure separates the lower lobe from the upper lobe. And these fissures extend from T4 to T5 posteriorly to the diaphragm anterior-inferiorly. The left oblique fissure is more vertically oriented than the right. And accessory fissures of the lung, usually there are only horizontal and oblique fissures, but in some individuals we can see the accessory fissures, which are normal anatomical variants. And they are azygous fissure, inferior axillary fissure, superior axillary fissure, and left horizontal fissure. Azygous fissure is most common among these, and it separates the azygous lobe from the rest of the lung. This is the frontal radiograph showing azygous fissure, and the red arrow indicates azygous vein. This is due to incomplete migration of the azygous vein. Instead of migrating cranially, it will invaginate and it will form a groove within the lung, forming azygous fissure. And second most common is the inferior axillary fissure. It divides the medial basal segments from the rest of the lower lobe. In this radiograph, you can see the inferior axillary fissure dividing the medial basal segment from the rest of the lower lobes. Superior axillary and left horizontal are rare, and superior axillary fissure will separate the superior segment of the lower lobe from the basal segments. Usually horizontal fissure is present only on the right side, but in some individuals we can see the horizontal fissure even on the left side, and it separates the lingula from the rest of the left upper lobe. Coming to the pleural cavity is a potential space between the parietal and visceral pleura. It contains a small amount of serous fluid, usually 5 ml and not more than 20 ml, which has two major functions. One is it lubricates the surface of the pleura, allowing them to slide over each other. And the second function is this produces a surface tension, pulling the parietal and visceral pleura together. This ensures that when thorax expands, the lung also expands, filling with the air. Hundreds of milliliters of fluid is produced and reabsorbed each day, and fluid produced primarily at the parietal pleura and reabsorbed at the visceral pleura. And it is even reabsorbed at the parietal pleura with the help of lymphatic drainage. Here we can see the pleural fluid filtration from the parietal pleura, and this is reabsorbed from the lymphatics present at the parietal pleura, as well as it is reabsorbed through a visceral pleura. And the lymphatics are costal lymphatics, diaphragmatic, and mediastinal lymphatics. Pleural recess. There are two pleural recesses, anteriorly and posterior inferiorly. The pleural cavity is not completely filled by the lungs, and this gives rise to recess where the opposing surface of the parietal pleura touch each other. There are two recesses. They are costodiaphragmatic and costomediastinal. This costodiaphragmatic is located between the costal pleura and the diaphragmatic pleura, whereas costomediastinal is located between the costal pleura and the mediastinal pleura behind the sternum. These recesses are of clinical importance because they provide a location where the pleural fluid will collect, such as seen in pleural effusion. This is the diagrammatic representation showing the costodiaphragmatic recess where the two parietal pleura are opposing each other and the lung tissue is not present here. And this is the costomediastinal recess. And the normal anatomy of the lung is maintained by a balance between the different elastic forces of the chest wall. They are the elastic recoil of the chest wall tries to pull the chest wall outward, and whereas the elastic recoil of the lung will create an inward pull. And now coming to the main topic, that is pleural pathologies. First one, we'll see the pneumothorax. Pneumothorax is presence of air in the pleural cavity. Air enters the cavity through a defect in either parietal or a visceral pleura, and it can be spontaneous, traumatic, or artificially induced pneumothorax. And it is of three types: open pneumothorax, closed, and tension pneumothorax. In open pneumothorax, there will be a communication between the bronchus and the pleura, and this communication is not sealed off, forming a bronchopleural fistula. In closed pneumothorax, the communication seals off, and the air trapped is slowly reabsorbed, and the lung re-expands in closed pneumothorax without any treatment, and there will be a spontaneous resolution. In tension pneumothorax, the communication persists and acts as a one-way valve, and the air increases during inspiration, coughing, sneezing, etc., creating more pressure inside the pleural cavity, and thereby compressing the adjacent structures. And this is a medical emergency, acute medical emergency, should be treated as soon as possible. Etiology of pneumothorax. It can be spontaneous, traumatic, or artificial. In spontaneous can be primary and secondary. Primary is without a known cause, and whereas secondary is due to the rupture of the congenital pleural bleb or rupture of subpleural TB focus or tension cyst, chronic bronchitis, and emphysema. In traumatic pleural pneumothorax, it is due to penetrating chest trauma, rib fractures, or iatrogenically induced. Artificial as a treatment of pulmonary TB. In olden days, we used to induce pneumothorax, artificial pneumothorax, by forcing the nitrogen into the chest through a needle pleurosynthesis. This will help in collapsing the lung in an attempt to close the tubercular cavities. The radiological appearances of pneumothorax. Usually the small pneumothorax will collect at the apex. As the air will go to non-dependent areas, it will be collected at the apex. The lung apex retracted towards the hilum on posterior anterior view. Here, this is the PA view showing a small pneumothorax at the apex of the left lung, and we can see the retracted lung as well towards the hilum. Large pneumothorax leads to complete relaxation and retraction of the lung with some mediastinal towards the normal side. This is the frontal radiograph showing a large pneumothorax on the right side, and these arrows indicates the pleural line. This is the collapsed lung. We can see you can differentiate between the adjacent lung, where we can see the normal vasculature in the lung, but here the lung is more black, more hyperlucent compared to the opposite lung, and the vascular markings are also lost. This is pneumothorax. And in tension pneumothorax may lead to massive displacement of the mediastinum with ipsilateral flattening of hemidiaphragm. This is the frontal radiograph of chest showing tension pneumothorax, where the ipsilateral hemidiaphragm is flattened with collapse of the adjacent lung, and a mediastinal shift is seen towards the opposite side. Another sign in pneumothorax is deep sulcus sign. Here, the costophrenic angle is abnormally deepened when pleural air collects laterally, producing deep sulcus sign. This is the frontal radiograph and CT reconstructed image, coronal image, where we can see the deep sulcus sign. Compared to the opposite costophrenic angle, this costophrenic angle is abnormally deepened. This denotes the pneumothorax. And double diaphragm sign. This is seen in a supine film. Here the air outlines the anterior portions of the hemidiaphragm, giving the appearance of a double diaphragm. This is another sign of pneumothorax. Loculated or encysted pneumothorax. Pleural adhesions may limit the distribution of the pneumothorax, resulting in loculated pneumothorax. We can see a loculated pneumothorax here, which is hyperlucent without any vascular markings. And the same can be appreciated on the CT coronal images, where there is a loculated pneumothorax with adjacent adhesions of the pleural adhesions. And the rupture of these pleural adhesions may produce hemopneumothorax, and discharge of an underlying infected subpleural lesion will lead to pyoneumothorax. This is a radiograph showing hydropneumothorax, where the classic picture of horizontal fluid level is seen, which separates the opaque fluid below from the lucent air above. This is a radiograph of hydropneumothorax. Now, coming to the pleural effusion, fluid will accumulate in the pleural space if the rate of its production exceeds its rate of absorption. It can be due to increased microvascular pressure in the lungs, decreased plasma oncotic pressure, and increased microvascular permeability, decreased lymphatic drainage from the pleural space, and passage of peritoneal fluid across the defects in the diaphragm. And the fluid can be a transudate, exudate, or a blood or chyle. And in transudate, the protein value is usually less, and whereas in exudate, the protein values are more. The causes for transudate are cardiac failure, constrictive pericarditis, and the non-cardiogenic causes like nephrotic syndrome, hepatic cirrhosis, anemia, Meeks syndrome, and mixed edema. The causes for exudate are mostly the infectious conditions will lead to exudate type of pleural effusion. They are TB, pneumonia, carcinoma of the lung, metastasis, malignancy, pulmonary infarction, pancreatitis, and systemic lupus erythematosus. When blood is accumulated in the pleural cavity, it is called hemothorax, and this is due to open or closed trauma to the chest, or hemophilia or excessive anticoagulation. And when chyle is accumulated, it is called chylothorax. This may develop secondary to damage or obstruction of the thoracic lymphatic vessels. Example, filariasis, carcinoma of the lung, lymphoma, and trauma can lead to chylothorax. The radiological features of pleural effusion. The pleural fluid will cast a shadow of density of water or soft tissue on the radiograph with concave upper edge. This is the frontal radiograph showing bilateral pleural effusion, where the costophrenic angles are obliterated, and we can see pleural fluid seen as a concave with the concave upper edge. This concave upper edge is due to the capillary action, and this is also called as Ellis S-shaped curve. Usually, the pleural fluid will be in the most dependent recess, and this is the posterior costophrenic angle. And a small effusion will tend to collect posteriorly. On a chest radiograph, about 100 to 200 ml of fluid is required to fill this recess and to be visible. And smaller effusions like 50 ml are even seen with lateral decubitus. And the best to assess the pleural fluid is ultrasound, where we can see 5 ml of fluid is also seen on ultrasound. This is a chest radiograph PA view showing a massive pleural effusion causing a complete whiteout lung on the right side, and the underlying lung is retracted towards the hilum, and this massive pleural effusion is causing a mediastinal shift to the opposite side. This is another case of massive pleural effusion with a mediastinal shift to the left. This is the chest radiograph showing the massive pleural effusion with a mediastinal shift towards the left, and the corresponding CT reconstructed image showing a massive pleural effusion with a collapsed lung towards the hilum. This is the collapsed lung, and a mediastinal shift is seen towards the opposite side. Atypical effusions. There are some atypical effusions like lamellar effusion. These are shallow collections between the lung surface and the visceral pleura. This is the lamellar effusion, and they represent interstitial pulmonary fluid. Another entity is subpulmonic effusion. This is the subpulmonic. In subpulmonic effusion, the fluid accumulates between the diaphragm and the undersurface of the lung, and it will move with the changes of posture demonstrated by horizontal beam lateral decubitus film. This is a normal PA view showing a subpulmonic effusion present between the diaphragm and the undersurface of the lung, where we can see this has an elevated diaphragm. And in the same patient, when the supine film is taken, the pleural fluid is redistributed, and the subpulmonic effusion changes with the posture, as we can see in this film. This is another case of subpulmonic effusion showing on frontal and as well as lateral films. This is the ultrasound image of the subpulmonic effusion showing fluid below the diaphragm, and this is the collapsed segment of the lung. And a similar picture can be seen on the CT reconstructed image where the fluid is seen above the diaphragm. The arrows indicate the diaphragm, and the fluid is seen above the diaphragm and under surface of the lung. This is subpulmonic effusion. Loculated fluids. Pleural space may be partially obliterated by the pleural disease, causing fusion of parietal and visceral layers. And the fluid collecting in horizontal fissure will produce a lenticular and oval-shaped shadow with well-demarcated edges. Loculated fluid in an oblique fissure may be poorly defined on frontal radiograph, but lateral film is diagnostic. Following the treatment, they may disappear rapidly and hence known as pseudo or vanishing tumors. This is the frontal and lateral radiographs showing a loculated pleural effusion in the horizontal fissure, giving a lenticular or an oval-shaped appearance. Empyema. Usually we cannot diagnose empyema on a plain chest film. We can just suspect the empyema on a plain film, and it is best diagnosed by CT or ultrasound. This is the chest radiograph showing a effusion on the left lung with an obtuse angle seen with the chest wall. Usually the pleural based lesions will be obtuse angle with the chest wall. Here we can see the angle is obtuse between the chest wall and the lesion. Whereas if the lesion is in the lung parenchyma, there will be an acute angle with the chest wall and the lesion. The pleural lesions usually will produce an obtuse angle. And on the CT, we can see the classic split pleura sign, distinguishing empyema from a peripheral pulmonary abscess. This is the axial section CT showing empyema with a split pleural sign. Ultrasonography of an empyema. The pleural fluid is separated by the septa. These are the septa. We can see the pleural fluid. In the pleural fluid, we can see the internal septations. This is the picture of empyema on ultrasound. And other signs of pleural effusion on CT. Displaced crust sign. Pleural fluid may collect posteriorly to the diaphragmatic crust and displace it anteriorly. This is displaced crust of the diaphragm, and this sign is seen in pleural effusions. And on CT, we have to differentiate pleural effusion from an ascites, and the diaphragmatic sign will help in this. Any fluid that is on exterior to the dome of the diaphragm, that is exterior to the diaphragm, is pleural effusion, and anything which is within the dome is ascites. Another pathology, pleural thickening. Pleural thickening is common and is usually represents the organized end stage of various active processes like asbestos exposure and pneumothorax and hemothorax. When generalized and gross, it is termed as fibrothorax and may cause significant ventilatory impairment. Blunting of CP angle is a frequent incidental finding on chest radiograph. It is due to previous episode of pleuritis, although a previous history of chest disease is often lacking. In asymptomatic patients and in the absence of other radiological abnormalities other than pleural thickening, it is of no clinical significance. We can just ignore the disease. Diffuse pleural thickening. Thickening of pleura that is more than 5 mm with a combined area of involvement more than 25% of the chest wall if bilateral and 50% involvement if unilateral is termed as diffuse pleural thickening. And whereas in benign pleural thickening is greater than 5 centimeters in width and 8 centimeters in craniocaudal extent and 3 mm in thickness. Malignant pleural disease features. Pleural thickening in the malignant pleural disease, that is mets from other location. The pleural thickening will be greater than 1 centimeter. Circumferential pleural thickening with evidence of crossing the mediastinal surface. Nodular pleural thickening and mediastinal pleural thickening are features of malignant pleural disease. This is a frontal radiograph showing biapical pleural thickening with an undulating margin with the lung. This is symmetrical bilaterally and measures less than 5 mm in height. And these are the corresponding CT images showing a soft tissue intensity in the apical regions of bilateral lungs and is composed mostly of extrapleural fat in addition to the pleural thickening. And without any symptoms and other radiological findings, we can ignore this. Pleural calcification, the most commonly seen following asbestos exposure, empyema, usually tuberculous, and hemothorax. In empyema and hemothorax, the calcification is irregular, resembles a plaque or a sheet, and is contained within the thickened pleura. Most common in lower posterior half of the chest and is usually unilateral. Asbestos-related calcifications occur as more discrete collections within the plaques and is usually bilateral. The most sensitive method for demonstrating a pleural plaque is HRCT, and ultrasound can be helpful in differentiating a plaque from a loculated fluid. For any fluid, the sensitive investigation is ultrasound. This is a frontal radiograph of chest showing multiple bilateral calcified plaques, giving a leaf-like appearance. This is also called as holy leaf appearance with a central predominance. These are the calcified pleural plaques. And now the last pathology, those are tumors, pleural tumors. They can be benign or malignant. Benign, the localized fibrous tumor or fibroma. This is usually presents with asymptomatic or an incidental finding on chest radiograph. There will be a well-defined lobulated mass adjacent to the chest wall, mediastinum, diaphragm, or pleural fissure. May show differential enhancement or low attenuation due to necrosis on CT. This is the frontal radiograph showing a well-defined lobulated mass adjacent to the chest wall. This is a case of fibroma. And the other benign etiology is subpleural lipoma. There will be a well-defined rounded mass, chain shape with respiration. And the soft tumors may erode the ribs if large. And they comprise fat, which is diagnostic. This is a frontal radiograph showing a small subpleural lipoma on the right lateral chest wall. Malignant pleural tumors. The commonest is metastatic tumors. Most commonly, it arises from the bronchus and breast. Primary malignancy, the malignant mesothelioma due to prolonged exposure of asbestos. Nodular pleural thickening may be associated with hemorrhagic pleural effusion, obscures the masses, and tissue diagnosis is obtained by percutaneous needle biopsy, but this is usually contraindicated because it will lead to tumor seeding. This is a case of malignant mesothelioma. Here, the chest radiograph PA view showing a lobulated left pleural opacity, and a similar picture can be seen on the CT scan axial section at the mid-thoracic level, showing nodular pleural tumor. This is nodular pleural tumor seen on the right side. This is a case of malignant mesothelioma, axial and reconstructed CT images showing a diffuse lobulated and nodular thickening of pleura with tumor extension into lobar fissures. There is a metastatic enlargement of some hilar and mediastinal lymph nodes, where we can see in this reconstructed coronal images. And this is the CT of malignant pleural disease. In this, there is a right pleural effusion, and there is extensive and irregular pleural thickening, which is characteristic of malignant process. And the metastasis is arising from the right metastasizing into the pleura. And that's it. Thank you. Any doubts?